Yeah.
And you have that.
Yeah, thank you.
You have that.
Thank you, brother. I say it's real music for real people with real problems.
The first song I ever heard of yours was Need a Favor. And I was like, holy shit.
Oh, God, thank you.
Holy shit, dude. That's a fucking song, man.
Yeah.
That's a song.
It was funny, man, when we were working on the record. So the album I'm fixing to drop is called Wits at Chapel, and I think it comes out June 2nd. Shameless plug, on the biggest podcast on earth. But the record Need a Favor, I was like, so can I tell you this story? It's a bit of a story, but it's fun to tell. So I had wrote like 100 songs last year, and I didn't feel great about any of them, to be honest. The label liked a few and was trying to pick radio singles, but I just didn't have no conviction about it, Joe. And my daughter at the same time had found her way into this little back road church in the middle of nowhere, about a country where we live. She kept asking me to come, and, you know, I have a tumultuous relationship with the Lord, so I wasn't, you know, sure how I'd show up, but I was like, you know what, I'll go. And I went, dude, there's 100 people, a back road church, you know, 20 of them were kids that went to high school with her. And around the same time, I caught this little motherfucker smoking pot, right? She's 15, she's doing 15-year-old kid stuff, and I was like, buddy, you won't believe it. About your age, I started making these same decisions, and I was going to this little bitty church in Antioch. I tell her the story of this church. She don't believe it. So I take her to this old church. It's still there. It's called Wits at Chapel Baptist Church. And that night, riding home with her, I didn't tell nobody, but in my mind, I thought, that's the album I'm writing. Like, fuck every song I wrote, I'm writing this album. I called Zach Crowell. He produced every Sam Hunt song ever. You know, one of the biggest producers in town. I've known him my whole life. He's here with me right now. And I said, dude, I want to write an album called Going to Church. And I just kind of want to write this kind of journey and just kind of A to Z it and write a real project. And Zach was like, I'm in. He's like, well, why don't you just call it Wits at Chapel? So that's how we ended up doing Wits at Chapel. So when Need a Favor came into the fold, I was like, what's worship music for sinners sound like? Like, what does a motherfucker like me? You know, because, you know, when you're in church, it's holy, holy, you are great. I was like, I don't necessarily feel that way. So how do I feel? You know what I mean? And then it was, I only talk to God when I need a favor. You know, and I was like, we got to build it with a choir and big production. I want that old stomp, clap, you know, that old church feel. And I want to bring like that vibe of that church, you know, into the, and the whole thing is, the whole album is built on that vibe of like, there's fire and brimstone. There's everything you go through in a Sunday morning worship service. If you've ever been to a Sunday in the South worship service, you're going to convince you you're a horrible human at some point. You're going to hell. And then at the end, they'll hit a major key instead of a minor one finally and go, but there's hope. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, how do I write that, you know?
Man, I've always been a fan of those preachers. I love the way they captivate an audience. Yeah. And even if they're crazy, even if they're talking nonsense, there's something exciting about watching some dude preach the word and just yell it out and
on fire.
Fire.
So I'm going to send you a link to the album, but I got a preacher throughout the whole album doing that, Joe.
Ooh.
That tied the record together.
Oh,
so
wow.
you ran, like, the album starts with this dude, like, and by the grace of God we were saved, and it just drops the first song.
Whoa.
It's cool, man.
That's amazing.
I got nerdy, dude. I went like old school, dude. I went like back to the 90s, Joe. I was in the studio, like, we were just getting high and coming up with shit.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was so much fun. It was probably the most fun I've ever had writing an album, because it's the first time I've sat down in a long time and wrote an album. Instead of just writing a bunch of songs and then picking an album. You know what I mean? I was like, no, I'm writing. Like, we're going to sit down and write an album.